Assalamu alaikum. You may recall when we studied political parties, I defined both political parties and interest groups, and I explained in some detail the difference between political parties and interest groups. Today, we are going to shed some more focus on interest groups, the relationship between interest groups and different types of government, weak or strong, the factors that make interest groups effective, and the several strategies interest groups use to achieve their goal. In fact, interest groups exist in all types of society, being democratic, being authoritarian, or even dictatorships. And this is the meaning of the statement interest groups are ubiquitous. So ubiquitous means exist everywhere. Um, why interest groups exist in all types of societies? Because in general, an individual has little influence over policy outcomes and on government. But when individuals form a group, they can have a great deal of influence. And this is the theory behind interest groups. As I mentioned before, an interest group refers to any collection of people, any set of organized individuals who are trying to influence government or the decision makers or the power holders, the three branches of government, in a way or another to achieve some of their specific goals. In this sense, we have different types of many and different types of interest groups. Some interest groups are temporary, others are permanent. Some focus on influencing a particular policy, the health policy, the economic policy. Others work on influencing broad changes in society. Some work Some work through the executive departments or ministries of the government, others through the judicial or through the courts, or through legislative sectors through the parliament, and still others through public opinion trying to influence the government through appealing to the public. But you know what? Even though we have many and different types of interest groups, and they actually interest groups in a society, in a single society, counts in thousands. But all interest groups have something in common. They are not accountable to the public, and this is actually another major difference between interest groups and political parties. What is the relationship between interest groups and government? 3 points are worth mentioning in this respect. First off, interest group activities depend on whether the state is strong or weak, as strong state is a requirement for an interest group activity. Second, with the growth of government, interest groups increase in number and types. Why? Because as government grows, it creates more programs, initiate more policies, and many interests actually will be centered around these programs and these issues, and then interest groups would be created trying to influence these programs and these policies. Third, sometimes interest groups participate in government or take over some functions of government. And this is called actually corporatism, and it is known in the Scandinavian countries, especially Sweden. And here corporatism refers to the direct participation of interest groups in government. And this participation may take one of two forms. Representatives of interest groups and policymakers meet regularly to discuss or decide public policy, or the government delegate some programs or some of its competencies to a specific interest groups to run it for an area or for even the whole country. What government created interest groups is all about? Well, this means some interest groups are created by the actions of government. How come? How to explain this? The government initiates a program or introduces a program like, for example, a health insurance program. This program will create interests among people to keep the program, to better benefit from the program, to improve the program. And this would lead the people who would benefit from the program to get organized, to advocate for the program. And here you go. Interest groups are established, and then the groups lobby or pressure the government, the three branches of the government, the legislature, the executive, the courts, to advocate for the program and to defend the interests of their members. Now, what are the factors that make interest groups effective? Well, the effectiveness or efficacy of interest groups depends on five factors. One, whether the prevailing culture in society is open or pluralistic. Second, the role of big money in politics. Third, whether the group is a single issue group or a multi-issue group. And the assumption here is that the single issue groups are more effective than multi-issue groups. For the size and membership of the group is also another important factors that make interest group effective or not. Finally, whether the group have a good access to the government, I mean to the three branches of the government, the executive, the legislature, uh, and the courts. If I started with political culture as a crucial factor that determines the development and effectiveness of interest group, I would say a country political culture affects the likelihood of the development and effectiveness of interest groups. How come? Well, interest groups flourish in open and pluralistic societies with little state control over group formation. And this is evident in West European societies and North American societies, especially in the United States and Canada. In societies that have a tradition of people joining groups, citizens tend to have higher levels of political efficacy, so they would have the feeling that they can make a difference. So they would go ahead with organizing uh, groups, trying to pressure the government to achieve their goal. Money is probably the single most important factor in determining the success and effectiveness of interest group. This is especially important during elections. One of the most common strategies of interest groups to influence politics is funding electoral campaigns. Because electoral campaigns are so expensive and no candidate, no political party can afford funding their own electoral campaign. But the problem is that this led to worries that politics is basically becoming the best government that money can buy. This is why some countries have tried various forms to limit the role of big money in politics through, for example, limiting campaign spending, subsidizing political parties, given or giving some money or allocate some money to political parties in order to fund their electoral campaigns. And public funding of elections means that here the government would uh, fund elections through using tax money. But the problem is still exists, which is even subsidizing political parties or public funding of elections will not able to overcome the cost of elections in most countries, especially, for example, in the United States. The larger question here arises whether or not money is out of control in politics. In fact, we have many and different answers to this question. But the pluralists, the proponents of the theory of interest groups, would say the amount of money has no real effect on politics. Why? Because the constant competitions between many and different interest groups would lead to the fact that no single group is able to dominate politics. So we can say that money is out of control in politics, but we have to admit that money plays an important or a crucial role in politics. Another important factor that determines the effectiveness or success of interest groups is the rise of single issue groups. The 1970s saw the rise of single issue interest groups, which are groups that care only about a single issue. In fact, this is very important in the success of interest groups because it makes the group more committed and gains the attention of politicians and decision makers. In other words, single issue groups are more effective than multi-issue groups. Most single issue groups are focused on moral issues, for example, abortion, which makes compromise on politics very, very difficult. The size of a group and its membership do matter when it comes to being effective or successful. Generally speaking, large groups in terms of size and membership have a lot of influence over government politics. But you have to put into consideration that size is not the only thing, and group size can be countered by other resources, especially money, organization, or organizational skills. Just compare between the influence of business associations and farmers associations or organizations in all societies, including Egypt. You would find out that even though business associations are much smaller in size, but much or more influential or more effective than large groups such as farmer organizations. Since all groups trying to influence a government to achieve some of the group's goals, then whether they have access to decision makers becomes very, very important in the success and effectiveness of the groups. In fact, much of the money contributed to electoral campaigns by groups is not about results of elections, but rather about gaining access to legislators, gaining access to the executive members. Speaking of access, some groups manage to establish some sort of structural access. Structural access takes place when groups have long-term friendly relationship with policymakers, being executive members or cabinet members or being legislators, and this help the most in achieving the group's goals and interests.